Imagine eternity. Got it? Now, add endless heat, mosquito bites, and the daily counting of barley, wheat, and millet. Welcome to ancient Egypt, a kingdom of gods, pharaohs, and bureaucratic nightmares, where you're forced to meticulously track harvests following the Nile's annual flooding. In this ironically dark journey through centuries past, you'll discover that the gods' harshest punishment isn't locusts, drought, or even a pharaoh's wrath. It's the endless repetition of the same tedious day. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm very curious to see who's joining us. Now, get comfortable. We're starting. You awake in the unrelenting heat of an Egyptian dawn. The air is thick, humid, and sticky. Opening your eyes, you find yourself sprawled across a worn reed mat, covered in fine Nile mud that seems to have permanently embedded itself into your pores. Above you, the sky already carries that sickly shade of washed out blue, promising another sweltering day. A fat, sluggish fly buzzes lazily past your ear, almost mockingly close, before settling onto your sweat streaked forehead. Another day in paradise, you mutter grimly, brushing away the insect. Your sarcasm falls flat. The mud walls of your hut respond with silent indifference. You push yourself up, bones creaking like the timbers of an overloaded riverboat, and step outside into a world that hasn't changed much in the thousands of years leading up to this exact moment. Every year, the Nile floods predictably, yet somehow each inundation seems to catch your villages off guard. It's like the Egyptians had invented bureaucracy precisely to handle surprise flooding, even though these floods occurred every single year with predictable monotony. Standing in the half shadow of your hut, you survey the landscape. The Nile, swollen and muddy, snakes its bloated way through the fields. Farmers move in slow, resigned motions, sinking up to their knees in mud. Their expressions range from weary resignation to outright despair as they assess the drowned fields. You sympathize. Your duty to count the harvest has become equally depressing, a seemingly endless cycle of wetness, rot, and tallies scratched onto clay tablets. The river gods have been generous, or so the priests keep reminding you. Indeed, the Nile has deposited thick black silt onto the fields, promising a rich harvest once you can actually grow anything in this swamp. But right now, with your sandals squelching miserably in muddy water, the promise of future abundance seems laughably distant. You trudge through the village, greeting your fellow villagers with nods that carry the deep, unspoken understanding of shared misery. Reaching the marker stone by the river, you find the village elder, a frail yet unfathomably long lived man named Nebhotep, already there, squinting critically at the carved measurement lines. Nebhotep's expression rarely changes. He looks permanently displeased, as if life itself had betrayed him long ago. The water reached 14 cubits this season, he drones, not even bothering with pleasantries. His voice carries the weariness of a man who has repeated the same information every year for 70 years without variation. 14 cubits. How exciting! You respond flatly, scraping mud from the soles of your feet against the marker stone. Is that good news? Or should we all start preparing our tombs early? Nebhotep ignores your sarcasm, eyes narrowed on the distant shimmering horizon. Last year was 13 cubits, and we barely made it through the planting. The year before that was 15, and half the village was swept away. The gods are playing dice with us. Comforting thought, you reply, observing a crocodile lounging insolently on a nearby mud bank. At least the crocodiles seem pleased. Nebhotep grunts, unimpressed, and points you toward the fields with his wrinkled, shaking finger. Your day, you realize with bleak resignation, will be dedicated to the tedious work of counting, grain by grain, handful by handful, the potential yield of crops not yet even planted. Welcome to the glory of the Egyptian agricultural bureaucracy. As you make your way through rows of slimy, flattened reeds, you ponder the strange wisdom of Egyptian priests and scribes. They record everything with relentless precision: crop yields, cattle births, river heights, never once questioning the futility or sheer boredom of it all. Perhaps, you muse darkly, eternal life was promised to scribes, because death itself grew bored watching their endless accounting. You pass a scribe named Kenti, squatting precariously on a rock, scribbling furiously onto a piece of papyrus as if his immortal soul depended on capturing precisely how many sheaves of barley had survived the flood. He glances up, eyes shadowed and desperate. 64 sheaves in this plot alone, he announces in a voice trembling with both pride and exhaustion. The harvest should be good this year, provided locusts don't come, and provided no pestilence strikes, and provided the mud dries in time, and provided. Thank you, Kenti. You interrupt gently, unwilling to hear another litany of potential catastrophes. I'll write down 64. You continue onward, feeling strangely jealous of the crocodiles. They never need to count grain or argue with scribes. They merely float, bask in the sun, and occasionally drag someone into the river to remind everyone who truly owns these muddy waters. Your journey brings you to a raised wooden platform erected at the edge of the village. Here you gather with other bored, weary souls tasked with the prestigious job of counting things. Armed with sharpened reeds and damp clay tablets, you prepare to spend the next several hours translating mud and plants into numbers that somehow matter deeply to the royal accountants who will never set foot in these fields. Begin counting, says Menka, the overseer, his voice duller than river mud. May the gods grant accuracy, patience, and forgiveness for whatever sins have brought us here. You stifle a laugh, scratching the first line into your clay tablet. 147 stalks of barley, northern section. One by one, methodically, monotonously, you record each plot of farmland, noting quantities, qualities, estimated yields, and potential losses. A mosquito lands heavily on your forearm, sinking its needle-sharp mouthparts into your skin. You let it feed undisturbed, too bored and weary to brush it off. Even the insects seem to acknowledge that your life has reached such tedious depths that resisting them is no longer worth the effort. When the sun reaches its blistering apex, Menka orders a pause. Lunch consists of barley bread, so dry it might have survived last year's flood, accompanied by beer sour enough to offend even Osiris himself. You chew slowly, wondering if anyone in history had been quite as miserable as an Egyptian harvest counter after the Nile's annual inundation. With lunch concluded and the sun punishing you all anew, you return to the counting. By the late afternoon, your clay tablet is full, your fingers aching, and your spirit reduced to a fine dust scattered carelessly across the landscape. As twilight approaches, bathing the muddy fields in blood red hues, you walk wearily back toward your hut. Tomorrow, you realize grimly, you will repeat every tedious moment of today, recording precisely the same kind of details with relentless accuracy, praying silently that something, anything, interesting might happen. Yet deep inside, you know the truth. Nothing ever happens here but counting. And thus, in the sticky twilight of ancient Egypt, your eyelids heavy and your heart heavier still, you resign yourself once more to the eternal wisdom of the Nile and its merciless cycles. As your head finally touches the stiff reed mat again, you close your eyes, muttering darkly to yourself, "Blessed be Egypt, land of the counting, realm of endless repetition." Sleep overtakes you, as monotonous as the life you lead, deep and muddy as the river itself. You wake with a familiar dull ache radiating through your bones. A thin, jaundiced sliver of sunlight filters reluctantly through the gaps in your mud brick walls, illuminating swirling motes of dust. For a blissful moment, you consider feigning illness, imagining the exquisite relief of avoiding the crushing tedium of the daily counting. But inevitably, duty calls, tediously, relentlessly, without sympathy. Stepping from your hut, you squint at the bright morning. The oppressive weight of responsibility settles instantly upon your shoulders like an unwanted companion. The fields stretch endlessly before you, shimmering under the harsh scrutiny of Ra. Your sandals crunch through dried mud, your toes curling in disgust at the residue of yesterday's floodwater. You make your way, as always, to the storage hut, the place where enthusiasm comes to die. Inside, stacks upon stacks of clay tablets and brittle papyrus scrolls tower precariously, records stretching back countless harvests. They stand as grim monuments to Egyptian precision, boredom solidified into permanence. As you reluctantly settle onto your stool, your fingers caress the brittle edges of the papyrus. The surface is rough, stubborn, and hostile to the delicate reed pen that you dip in black ink. Each mark feels like carving your own funeral inscription. Around you, fellow scribes sit hunched and miserable, their faces hollowed by years spent documenting the world's least thrilling details. A man named Rekmire, known for his tireless devotion to accuracy and profound lack of humor, hovers over your shoulder. He breathes heavily, inspecting your every stroke. Each number must be perfect. He drones softly into your ear. The great Pharaoh's granaries depend on our work. One careless mark, and chaos ensues. Yes, Reckmeyer, you respond flatly, Your tone as dry as the papyrus beneath your hand. Heaven forbid Egypt's mighty civilization collapses because I miscount a single handful of barley. He blinks slowly, unmoved. Humor, evidently, has been outlawed in Rekmir's soul. He moves on to torment another scribe, and you return to your bitter task. Your reed scratches carefully onto the scroll, recording crop totals in painstaking detail. 387 sheaves, southern field, east of irrigation ditch. Condition moderately damp. Predicted spoilage approximately one-sixth. The day drags onward. Occasionally, your weary eyes drift upward, catching sight of small sparrows flitting cheerfully between the reeds. You envy them profoundly. Birds never count barley. They neither record nor measure. They merely chirp, flutter, and live their fleeting, meaningless, but blissfully unquantified lives. A soft sigh escapes your lips, and you are immediately glared at by your nearest neighbor, Marira, a man whose life appears dedicated entirely to counting millet seeds individually, just to torment himself. He leans toward you, eyes narrowed suspiciously. Your focus wavers, he whispers sternly. The kingdom's granaries will know your error. The gods watch closely. You nod slowly, sarcastically grateful for his sage advice. Indeed, Marira, I shall be more diligent. I wouldn't want the afterlife to involve recounting this harvest for eternity. He looks puzzled, uncertain if you've mocked him or offered genuine insight. You turn back to your work, already regretting the wasted moment. Hours pass with glacial speed, your shoulders a hunch ever deeper, your fingers cramp with each carefully etched numeral. Midday arrives, bringing its insipid meal of dry bread and thin beer, an unchanging menu designed explicitly, you suspect, to strip away your remaining joy. Sitting in the shade, your thoughts wander toward an ancient scribe named Imhotep, who, according to tradition, invented the Egyptian number system. Perhaps Imhotep never truly existed. Perhaps he was just a myth, created to justify the existence of tedious people like Rekmire and Marira. Whoever he was, you decide, Imhotep clearly never envisioned the depths of boredom his invention would unleash. Your reflections are interrupted as Khufu, an unusually cheerful assistant, approaches carrying another stack of papyrus. More records from the western fields, he announces gleefully, as though delivering treasure rather than paperwork. Wonderful, you mutter darkly, accepting your burden like an offering to the god of despair. As the afternoon sun sinks lower, your eyesight blurs, fatigue weighing on you like bricks on the Great Pyramid itself. Yet, sleep is a distant hope. In Egypt, counting never truly ends. Even after sunset, the scribes gather by flickering lamps, murmuring softly, exchanging notes, verifying tallies. Endless nights spent arguing passionately over the number of sheaves, ears of wheat, and grains of barley. This night is no different. Darkness descends heavily upon the village, broken only by flickering oil lamps that draw moths and scribes in equal measure. You join this grim assembly, seated cross-legged beside others who have long since abandoned dreams in favor of numbers. Marira argues loudly with Rekmire, claiming someone miscounted precisely 17 sheaves of millet, an outrage punishable by divine wrath, apparently. You watch silently, too tired to care. Across the room, Khufu enthusiastically recounts, yet again, the story of how Egyptian numerals evolved from simple tally marks to the complicated symbols you all now dread. He beams, thoroughly fascinated by his own story, oblivious to the groans and eye rolls around him. You let your mind drift again, picturing your village centuries from now, historians marveling at your impeccable records. How tragic, you think, that history will remember this soul crushing monotony as a marvelous feat of organization and brilliance. Eventually, Rekmir demands silence. We must finalize today's tallies, he says gravely. Accuracy is our sacred duty. So begins another long night of weary recalculations and cross checking, your eyes straining against flickering lamplight, your fingers trembling with exhaustion. Finally, when the first hint of dawn colors the horizon, Rekmiri declares, with solemn satisfaction, all tallies match, Egypt will prosper. You shuffle home through the gray, pre dawn haze, passing fields shrouded in mist. Sleep, you know, will be fleeting, barely enough to prepare for tomorrow's repetition. As you collapse onto your mat, your last conscious thought is darkly humorous. Perhaps eternity itself is just an endless papyrus scroll upon which you must forever record harvest after harvest, trapped in infinite, perfect monotony. You close your eyes, almost laughing bitterly at your own misery. Tomorrow awaits with more tablets, more papyrus, more barley, and more unbearable counting. Thus, you slip into uneasy sleep, counting stalks of barley even in your dreams, trapped forever in the merciless grasp of Egyptian bureaucracy. Dawn finds you once more tangled within your worn mat, haunted by dreams of endless scrolls and barley sheaves that multiply relentlessly beneath your weary fingertips. Groaning softly, you pry open your eyes, greeted again by the dreary sight of cracked mud walls. The gentle buzzing of flies whispers mockingly, reaffirming that yes, another identical day has arrived. Dragging yourself upright, you silently question what unforgivable transgression you committed in a previous life to earn this eternal punishment of endless counting. Clearly, somewhere in your distant past, you must have offended one of Egypt's notoriously unforgiving deities, perhaps Thoth, the patron god of scribes, who apparently decided your punishment would be paperwork stretching into eternity. This grim suspicion deepens as you leave your hut, stepping carefully to avoid stepping in fresh mud and make your way towards the great temple. The priests have requested your presence today, an invitation that fills your heart with quiet dread. Interaction with priests generally involves long, dull sermons about the hidden meanings behind perfectly ordinary things, all delivered in a monotonous drone that rivals even Rekmire's talent for inducing sleep. Reaching the temple gates, you're greeted by the solemn glare of the high priest, Ankeper, a man whose smile, rumor has it, was last observed during the reign of some obscure pharaoh, now known only to historians. Today, Ankepper appears particularly solemn, his lips thin, face etched deeply by lines formed through decades of stern disapproval. Welcome, he says dryly, in a tone suggesting the opposite sentiment. We must consult you on the sacred significance of this year's inundation. Wonderful, you murmur darkly, following him through shadowed hallways lined with towering columns, each etched with hieroglyphs detailing gods, monsters, and incomprehensible cosmic bureaucracy. You wonder if the gods themselves grow bored, recording these endless prayers, complaints, and demands. In a dim chamber lit only by flickering lamps, other priests wait silently, their shaved heads glistening like polished granite. Ankepper gestures solemnly towards a large papyrus scroll, intricately decorated but ominously dull. The flood rose precisely 14 cubits, he intones gravely, tapping the scroll reverently, a sacred number. Clearly, Osiris and Isis communicate something profound to us. You squint skeptically at the number. 14, you repeat slowly. The gods chose precisely 14 cubits to convey a cosmic message. Ankepper nods slowly, gravely certain. Indeed, 14 cubits represent 2 times 7, 7 being a mystical number symbolizing perfection and harmony. Thus, the gods doubled their blessing, yet tempered it with caution. Fascinating, you say, voice as dry as desert sand. And yet, last year was 13, and the year before, 15. Did the gods change their minds? Ankepper's eyes narrow slightly. Clearly, your attitude borders on blasphemy, but today he chooses to tolerate it. The gods test our faith through subtle numerical variations, he explains patiently, in the tone of a man accustomed to lecturing confused children. It is our duty to interpret their will. Of course, you mutter, resigned. And do the gods also control the swarms of mosquitoes and locusts? Or is that simply nature tormenting us for sport? Ankepper ignores your sarcasm, turning instead to a younger priest named Kepri, thin, pale, and forever nervous. Kepri unrolls yet another papyrus, trembling slightly. We have observed the ibis birds closely, Kepri reports anxiously, eyes wide with reverence, or perhaps fear of Ankepper's displeasure. Their behavior indicates moderate flooding next year. Ankepper nods sagely, visibly satisfied. The ibis never lies. And the cats, Kepri? Kepri swallows, hesitant. Well, the cats have shown indecision. You raise an eyebrow, incredulous. Indecisive cats? Yes, Kepri whispers solemnly. Some slept facing east, others west. Clearly, the gods remain undecided about next year's harvest. You suppress the urge to laugh or cry at the thought of an entire civilization planning its survival on feline sleeping patterns. Ankepper turns to you abruptly. Your records confirm our interpretations. Perfectly, you reply flatly, already resigned. The barley and wheat agree with the indecisive cats. The priests murmur approval, utterly serious, oblivious to your quiet despair. After hours of such tedious discussion, you finally escape into the glaring sun, relieved yet exhausted. Outside, your path crosses Rekmirez. His face bears a permanent scowl, a perfect match for your own inner gloom. How went your consultation? he asks in a weary voice. The gods confirmed precisely nothing, you respond bitterly, except that our counting, once again, pleased them barely. He nods knowingly. The gods demand perfect balance. One miscount, and disaster follows. Remember this. I could hardly forget, you mutter darkly. After all, eternity itself may depend on my ability to record the exact number of barley stalks without error. Rekmiri grunts softly, unimpressed by your philosophical melancholy, and walks away. Left alone, you wander toward the riverside, pausing by the marker stone again, staring resentfully at the neatly carved numerals. 14 cubits, you whisper bitterly. Perfection or divine joke? You sit heavily by the water's edge, watching farmers drag themselves through the muddy fields, toiling endlessly beneath the sun's merciless gaze. Occasionally, a crocodile surfaces lazily, reminding you again of nature's cruel indifference. Deep down, you recognize a bitter truth. The priest's confident claims are mere illusions. The gods probably care little about cubits or cats. The Nile floods, barley grows or rots, and Egypt endures, not because of divine intervention, but despite endless superstitions and tedious rituals. The evening descends softly, painting the river gold, yet your heart remains heavy, drowning beneath the weight of monotonous duties and meaningless interpretations. Egypt, you muse gloomily, is perhaps history's greatest experiment in blending bureaucracy, superstition, and eternal boredom. As night returns, you shuffle back toward your hut, the moon casting faint silver shadows upon the mud. Inside, sleep beckons grimly, a restless slumber filled again with counting, tallying, and interpreting meaningless divine messages. Closing your eyes, you whisper sardonically into the darkness. Praise to Egypt, land where even gods are bureaucrats. With that cynical prayer lingering, sleep once again claims you, though restlessly, as your mind endlessly counts sheaves, stalks, and floods, forever imprisoned within Egypt's divine bureaucracy. The day begins with a dull ache behind your eyes, a grim reminder of yet another night spent dreaming in tally marks. You sit up slowly, your limbs protesting weakly, as though pleading for release from your endless penance of counting grain. As you rub your weary eyes, you hear hurried footsteps approaching your mud brick hut. You step outside just in time to encounter Khufu, normally cheerful and enthusiastic, but today pale and visibly shaken. His eyes dart nervously around, as though Anubis himself lurks nearby. What troubles you, Khufu? You ask wearily, secretly envying even his anxiety. At least he feels something other than relentless boredom. The officials, he stammers, voice shaking slightly. From the pharaoh's palace, they have come to review the records of the harvest. A sudden chill crawls down your spine, despite the blistering morning heat. Palace officials mean one thing: trouble. Egyptian bureaucrats rarely travel unless compelled by suspicion or displeasure, usually both. You sigh deeply, accepting your fate. Where are they now? Inspecting tablets with Rekmire, Khufu whispers urgently, glancing fearfully toward the storage hut. They claim discrepancies were found. Your heart sinks further. Discrepancies are never merely mistakes, they are offenses against Ma'at herself, the divine embodiment of truth and cosmic order. Errors invite chaos. Errors upset the pharaoh. Errors demand punishment. You approach the hut cautiously, sandals crunching softly over sun dried mud. Inside, Reckmeyer stands rigidly beside two stern looking officials, their fine linen robes gleaming brightly, adorned with royal insignia marking their high status and capacity for cruelty. Reckmere's face is devoid of color, his usually confident eyes wide with terror. He notices you entering and swallows visibly. There he is, he murmurs weakly, as though offering you as sacrifice to appease their wrath, our most diligent recorder. One of the officials, a man whose face might have been carved from granite for all the warmth it shows, turns slowly toward you. His eyes narrow slightly. Explain, he commands, voice colder than Nile water. Your tablets record a discrepancy. The Pharaoh himself demands accuracy. You bow respectfully, though your heart pounds with dread. If there is a discrepancy, honored official, it must surely be minor. Our scribes have counted and recounted. He steps closer, unblinking. Minor, your tablets differ by exactly 43 sheaves of barley from those counted by neighboring villages. Such carelessness insults the Pharaoh. You feel an irrational surge of laughter bubbling dangerously inside you at the absurd precision, 43 sheaves, as though the universe might collapse due to their absence. Yet the cold stare before you stifles all mirth. Allow me to review, you say hastily, reaching for your papyrus scrolls. Surely we can find the error swiftly. See that you do, he says icily. The Pharaoh's granaries depend on your accuracy. Egypt's survival rests on your counting. You nod numbly, acutely aware of Reckmere is trembling beside you. For once, his meticulousness offers no protection. Together, you frantically pore over tablet after tablet, eyes straining against the heat, searching for the offending error. Hours pass under the unyielding scrutiny of Pharaoh's officials, each silent moment dragging painfully onward. Panic slowly consumes your mind, exhaustion fraying your thoughts. You imagine vividly the horrific punishments Pharaoh reserves for bureaucrats who offend divine order, lashings, imprisonment, exile to desert wastelands, or worse, forced recounting of every grain harvested until madness sets in. Finally, your eyes catch a small inconsistency. Heart racing, you recheck carefully, dread building swiftly inside your chest. Yet, the truth emerges clearly. It wasn't your mistake, it was Reckmire's. Your gaze shifts slowly toward him, and his eyes meet yours, filled suddenly with realization and quiet despair. Reckmire, the guardian of accuracy, the meticulous scribe who once threatened disaster for a single misplaced tally, has erred. The silence deepens unbearably. You must choose your words carefully. Betraying Reckmire could spare you punishment, but condemn him to Pharaoh's merciless wrath. Saving him risks shared punishment, yet preserves your humanity amidst this endless cycle of counting and despair. Before you speak, Reckmire steps forward, trembling but resolute. The error was mine alone. he declares hoarsely. 43 sheaves, I miscounted. The officials glance sharply at one another, their granite faces softening imperceptibly into cold satisfaction. So be it, says the lead official, voice devoid of compassion. You understand the consequences? Rekmiri nods slowly, resigned to his fate. I will accept whatever punishment the Pharaoh deems appropriate. They depart swiftly, leaving the storage hut heavy with oppressive silence. You look helplessly toward Rekmire, whose shoulders slump beneath the crushing weight of his shame. You shouldn't have, you begin softly, but he interrupts bitterly. I dedicated my life to perfect counting, Rekmir whispers, his voice breaking slightly. Yet even I failed. Perhaps the gods mock us all, and there is no true order, only meaningless repetition. You nod slowly, heart aching with shared misery. Perhaps counting itself offends the gods, you reply bitterly. Perhaps they tire of our arrogance in believing numbers can control the Nile or fate. He sighs deeply, eyes hollow with defeat. Whatever awaits me, I accept. But you, promise me something. What? Keep counting, he says grimly, because someone must uphold the illusion. Without it, Egypt crumbles. Nightfall comes quickly, mercifully cloaking the village in shadows. Reckmeyer is taken quietly away, escorted by grim-faced guards toward the uncertain judgment of Pharaoh's justice. You stand numbly, watching him vanish into darkness, uncertain if you pity him or envy his escape from the endless grind. As you retreat to your hut, you reflect bitterly upon the absurdity of it all, the crushing weight of numbers, the ruthless precision demanded by rulers who never set foot in muddy fields, and the countless lives spent recording harvests destined to decay. Yet despite everything, doubt gnaws ceaselessly at your heart. Perhaps Rekmir was right. Perhaps numbers truly hold Egypt together, a delicate illusion of order binding chaos into submission. Perhaps your dull, thankless task truly preserves the fragile balance between civilization and anarchy. Sleep claims you reluctantly, your dreams troubled by visions of punishment and sacrifice, haunted endlessly by Rekmir's weary face. Tomorrow, inevitably, you will rise again, returning dutifully to the fields, counting grain stalk by stalk as you carry the heavy burden of precision and fear upon your weary shoulders. And you wonder darkly, as you slip into restless sleep, if Pharaoh himself ever dreams of counting sheaves, forever tormented by the same oppressive numbers that imprison you daily in this relentless bureaucratic nightmare. You awaken slowly, your consciousness stirring like the slow, inevitable rise of the Nile itself, predictable, weary, and without mercy. The light that seeps through the cracks of your hut is no longer merely harsh. It feels hostile, mocking your very existence. You sit up, bones protesting quietly, their creaking now sounding eerily like the grinding of reed pens against dry papyrus. Today, somehow, the monotony feels heavier. Rekmir's absence casts a shadow deeper than the midday sun. You step outside, greeted by the usual dreary village bustle. Farmers trudge toward muddy fields. Scribes hurry anxiously toward piles of tablets. Priests mumble prayers to indifferent gods. yet everything feels hollow, each action merely an echo of previous days. Khufu approaches cautiously, his former exuberance now dimmed to wary hesitance. He hands you yet another stack of papyrus, eyes cast down respectfully, but carefully avoiding conversation. News of Rekmir's punishment has traveled swiftly. You accept the burden silently, acknowledging the grim weight transferred from his shoulders to yours. Settling once more at your usual place, you begin counting again. Your reed pen scratches mechanically against papyrus, recording barley, wheat, millet, numbers accumulating endlessly. Yet now each tally carries deeper dread. Errors are no longer merely bureaucratic inconveniences, they are existential threats. 43 sheaves haunt you, their ghostly absence whispering warnings from the corners of your mind. At midday, Ankepper visits unexpectedly, his expression unchanged from your last encounter, eternally solemn, eternally displeased. He regards you with cold scrutiny. The gods test us with Rekmira's error, he states flatly, voice as empty as temple corridors. Egypt demands a perfection. You stare back wearily, yet perfection remains always beyond reach, priest. Perhaps our attempts to quantify the divine order insult the gods more than please them. Ankepper's gaze sharpens dangerously. Blasphemy. Numbers hold Egypt together. Counting ensures Ma'at's balance. You shrug slightly, exhausted beyond fear. And yet, Ankepper, no matter how many sheaves we count, the Nile rises as it wishes. Crocodiles still hunt our shores. Locusts devour our crops without consulting our tablets. Perhaps the gods mock us precisely because we believe numbers grant control. He steps closer, eyes narrowed suspiciously. Beware such thoughts. Pharaoh's ears hear everything. You nod silently, returning dutifully to your tablets, understanding fully the unspoken threat. Your role is not to question, only to record and preserve illusions. Days blur seamlessly into nights, each identical to the last. You count tirelessly, barely eating, barely sleeping. Slowly, your identity merges completely with your work until you no longer distinguish yourself from the numbers you record. You become merely a vessel for endless calculations, a human tablet marked by invisible tally marks. Weeks pass, and eventually, the annual harvest festival approaches, the culmination of your grim efforts. The village briefly awakens from its stupor, preparing offerings, chanting hymns, and performing elaborate rituals meant to honor gods and assure another year's fertility. Yet you remain numb, untouched by the festivities, bound instead to endless scrolls. As evening approaches, Menka summons you, face worn and weary as your own. Come, he says softly, gesturing toward the temple grounds. Tonight we submit our tallies to the priests. Perhaps they will finally let us rest. You follow silently, carrying your scrolls like precious burdens. Inside the temple, priests chant solemnly beneath flickering torches, voices echoing hollowly against stone walls. Ankepper waits upon a raised platform, gaze severe and penetrating. Present your tallies, he commands formally. You step forward, unrolling your scroll slowly, voice drained of all emotion. The harvest totals exactly 7,842 sheaves of barley, 6,312 sheaves of wheat, and 4,219 sheaves of millet. No discrepancies found. A murmur of satisfaction ripples among the priests. Ankeper nods gravely, offering rare, faint approval. Ma'at remains balanced. Egypt survives another year. Yet as you roll up your scroll, relief never arrives. Instead, an emptiness fills you, realizing the futility. Next year, you must count again, and the year after, forever. Outside, villagers rejoice, drinking beer and singing loudly to appease the gods. You slip quietly away, drawn toward the dark banks of the Nile. Standing silently by the water, you stare blankly at the moon's distorted reflection rippling upon its surface. Nebhotep joins you quietly, his aged presence oddly comforting in your solitude. Another year complete, he mutters softly, voice tinged with resignation, yet nothing truly changes. You nod slowly, bitterly. We count endlessly, believing numbers bring order, yet perhaps order itself is the cruelest illusion. Nebhotep sighs gently. My child, counting is Egypt's eternal ritual. Pharaohs rise and fall, floods come and recede, yet always the scribes remain, tallying forever, never finished, never released. You close your eyes painfully, then perhaps life itself is merely counting, endlessly repeating cycles without meaning. He chuckles faintly, humorless yet gentle. Perhaps, yet without counting, we are lost. Numbers bind chaos, providing comfort even in misery. You open your eyes again, gazing solemnly at distant stars, eternally fixed points in an indifferent universe. But what comfort is there, knowing tomorrow brings only repetition? Nebhotep's voice softens kindly. The comfort is simply knowing tomorrow comes at all. The Nile floods again, crops grow again, life endures, even if tedious and cruel. You stand silently together for a long moment, absorbing quiet truths revealed beneath moonlight's stark honesty. Eventually, Nebhotep departs, leaving you alone by the water's edge. You watch calmly as the river continues flowing relentlessly onward, carrying away doubts, errors, and forgotten sheaves alike, indifferent to your counting or despair. Slowly, resolution settles within you, acceptance of your eternal task. Tomorrow, you will rise again, counting stalks of barley, papyrus scrolls filling endlessly beneath your weary hand. Yet perhaps acceptance itself grants peace. Counting becomes prayer, repetition becomes meditation, and monotony, ironically, becomes salvation. Returning finally to your hut, you lie down, eyes closing slowly. Dreams carry you gently into sleep, visions of endless fields, eternal rivers, countless sheaves, yet somehow now comforting rather than oppressive. As darkness wraps gently around you, one quiet realization remains. Perhaps eternity is merely counting after all. Yet in counting, you find order, in order meaning, and in meaning life itself, forever cycling, forever enduring, forever repeating. Thus, beneath the silent, timeless sky of ancient Egypt, you drift peacefully into sleep, accepting your eternal role, bound forever to the Nile's endless rhythm, counting eternally for gods and pharaohs who themselves fade, while Egypt itself remains tedious, precise, eternal, forever repeating, forever counting, forever Egypt,